In this lesson, we're going to build what is presumably our first web app. The first thing we'll need to do after we've applied all the updates and we've closed down Visual Studio is actually launch it. And in Windows 8.1, you need to go searching for it. So we're going to go to the Start page, and then we'll go to the Apps page by using the little down arrow in the lower left-hand corner. And then we'll scroll over to the right. These are in alphabetical order. And when I find Visual Studio, I'm going to look for this, Visual Studio Express 2013 for Web entry. I'm going to right-click and select Pin to Taskbar. And so that'll make it convenient for me now whenever I'm on the desktop to just launch it from the taskbar in Windows. So I'll click it, and the very first thing you see is the Start page. I think I spoke briefly about it in the setup video. Let's go ahead and create a new project from either this link here on the Start page, or we can go File, New Project, and that'll open up the New Project dialog. Now, you'll have to navigate the installed templates. So it'll start off here, Installed Templates, Visual C#, Web, and then you should be able to see a entry in the middle called ASP.NET Web Application, Visual C#. Make sure you're not using Visual Basic. And then we're going to change this name to My First Web App. No spaces. You can use the capitalization scheme that I use there. And then I'm going to click OK in the lower right hand corner. And we're going to select in this new ASP.NET project the type of ASP.NET project we want to create. There's several different flavors or types of ASP.NET applications. We're going to want to work with web forms for this series. And then as you progress through this track, you can go down the ASP.NET MVC series. But when we're selecting a template, we're going to make sure to select an empty template. I'll explain why in another lesson. But we want to add the folders and core references for web forms. Now, by default, I think the first time you run Visual Studio, Host in the Cloud is selected. You want to deselect that and then click the OK button. And now Visual Studio is creating a project. A project is kind of a collection of all the file settings, references, and just all the assets, whether that be images or sounds or whatever the case might be for a given web application. Now, what we'll do is work inside of this Solution Explorer first. It will show us a solution, which is at the very top of kind of the hierarchy, and then solutions own one or more projects. For our series of lessons, we're only going to work with one project per solution. So I'm going to right-click that project named My First Web App, not the solution, the entry below it. I'll right-click it, and in the context menu, I'm going to select the Add, and then submenu Web Form. And it'll ask us to specify a name. I'm going to type in capital D, default, and click OK. And that'll create a page named default.aspx. The .aspx file name indicates that we're working with web forms. All right, so what you'll see at first is HTML mixed with some ASP.NET declarative bits. We want to ignore this for the majority of this series. We're going to work in the designer after you have gone through the HTML5 and CSS3 series. Then we'll come back and explain what some of these things are. But for now, we're just going to mask all of that complexity and to delay that until we cover it in another series. So we're going to be working primarily here in the designer, which is a rough approximation of what your web pages will look like once they're running on the client's web browser. So to begin, what we want to do is add a number of text and controls to our page to compose the body of our page. And so you can see our mouse cursors blinking inside of this body area. It's a little dashed square at the very top, and I'm going to look for the toolbox, which is on kind of to the left of this area, and I'm going to click on it once, and I'm going to go over here to the right-hand side of the toolbox and use this little pin, like so, to pin down or to disable auto hide for that window, because we'll be using it and then we'll get rid of it a little bit later. All right, so the first thing that I want to do inside of this little box is type what is your first name, question mark, and I'm going to hit the space bar twice on my keyboard, space space. And now what I'm going to do is look in the toolbox for a control called text box, and I'll double click that in order to insert the text box in my web page at the point where my cursor was at. All right, now I'm going to use the arrow keys on my keyboard to go to the end of that line, at the end of that text box. Now if I go too far into the next line, I'm going to actually use the other arrow key to go back to the end, and then hit the enter key twice on my keyboard, enter, enter, and I'm going to type what is your last name, space space, and I'm going to double click the text box to insert another text box control on my page. Again, I use the arrow keys to move to the end of that line, I guess you could say, and then I'm going to hit the enter key 2 more times, and then in the toolbox I'm going to go near the top and find the button, and I'll double click to insert a button inside the web page. I'm going to use the arrow keys 1 more time to put that cursor on the right side of the button. I'm going to hit the enter key 2 more times and then find the label control and double click that and insert that onto the page. And that's all that we're going to need from the toolbox. So I'm going to select the auto hide, the pin, and click it once so that the toolbox now disappears off to the left hand side. Great. All right, so the next thing that we want to do are set some attributes of these controls. These are actually called server controls, ASP.NET server controls. We'll explain what the implication and the importance of that term in another video, but for now let's just move forward. I'm going to use my mouse cursor to my mouse to select that first text box. And then I'm going to go over here to this little window that's underneath the Solution Explorer by default. And what I want to do is change some things about this text box, and in fact all the controls that we've added. And the thing that I want to change about it is its programmatic ID. In other words, how I'm going to reference and access that text box in my C# code. If you don't understand what that means just yet, I'll explain and show you kind of the relationship in the next lesson, but I think you'll figure it out once you see me doing this. All right, so I'm going to give this a name that will help me remember the name of that text box in the future. So I typically try to use the name of or the intent of what that text box is trying to do. It's trying to, in this case, keep track of the first name. So I'll give this the name first name text box. And notice in that lower right hand corner the convention I used. The first letter F is lowercase, but then every other word in that term begins with a capital letter. Capital N, capital T, and capital B. There are no spaces, no periods, no underscores, anything like that. So then once I've made that change in that particular property window, I'm going to hit the enter key on my keyboard, and then I'm going to select the next text box and change its programmatic ID. So I've selected it. I'm going to go down to the very bottom of the properties window, and I'm going to change this to last name text box, lowercase l, capital N, capital T, capital B, and then I'll hit the enter key on my keyboard. Now with the button control, not only do I want to change its programmatic ID, but I want to change another attribute. I want to change something about its appearance. I want to change the text. I don't want it to just say button. I want to say click me. All right. So the first thing I will do is I'm going to change the name to OK button. So lowercase OK, capital B button. Hit enter. And then I'm going to scroll up until I find on the left hand side this text attribute. Now if you have a hard time finding it, I agree, sometimes it's difficult to find things. You can use these little pluses and minuses to roll up all of the sections, and you'll want to go to appearance in this particular case, and it's the last item in the appearance category. And I'm going to change it from its default setting button to click me. All right. And you can see when I hit the enter key on my keyboard, it changed the designer representation of the button to actually have the words click me on it. Cool. All right. Finally, I'm going to select the label, and I'm going to go to the miscellaneous category because that's where the programmatic ID can be set. and I'm going to change its name to result label. All right, so lowercase r, capital L in label. And then I want to remove the default text. So whenever the application first starts, I don't want there to be any text displayed on screen. Once we click the Click Me button, we will insert text into that label. So I'm going to go up here to the text property that we found a moment ago and then just use the delete key on my keyboard to remove the text and then hit enter. Now you can see the representation on the designer. It shows the name of the control result label in square brackets. That's fine. That's just for us to see at design time. What we're doing right now is designing that particular item exists and it has no default text in it. Okay. So now what I want to do, I'm going to double click this Click Me button. So I'm going to double click it and watch what happens. All of a sudden, another file tab is open. So here's our first tab, default.aspx, and it opens up a new file called default.aspx.cs, and this code is C#. Notice that it put our mouse cursor, or our text cursor rather, inside of this area here. As you can see in my lines 17 through 20, it inserts that the blinking cursor at line number 19. It's important where that cursor is at. That's where we want to do our work. Do not leave the confines of that curly brace above it and the curly brace below it. In other words, this is the only area that I want you to type in, inside of those two curly braces, the opening and closing curly braces. All right, and so here's what we're going to do. Now just type it exactly the way that I have it here. One of the things that I hear most often, especially in the first video or two from students, is that, Bob, I wrote what you wrote and it doesn't work. There must be a problem with Visual Studio on my computer. I have to say this: if you typed exactly what I type and you don't see any red squiggly lines underneath any of the words, you will have done it correctly. But if you see any red squiggly lines or you get any errors whenever you try to run the application, then you didn't type it exactly the way that I did. All right? Double, triple check. Writing code is an exercise in precision, in being precise. And typically when we type, I speak for myself, but I'm probably speaking for you too, we're not as precise when we're typing out paragraphs and sentences and emails and text messages as we must be with code. The computer cannot just guess what we meant by with a mistake in our code. Even a human can look at a text message and see it not formed properly, and it can understand. So make sure you type it exactly the way I type it. I can't emphasize that enough. If it doesn't work, you wrote it wrong. You did something wrong. Okay, check it again. So here we go. String first name equals first name text box dot text semicolon. Okay? Make sure you have that. Lowercase f in first name, capital N in first name, and then this is the programmatic identifier for that first text box that holds the first name. Okay? So now I'm going to hit, when I go to the end of that line, to the right of that semicolon, I'm going to hit the enter key once on my keyboard. I'm going to type the next line. Okay. All right, and it's important here that you use double quotes, an opening set of double quotes, and a closing set of double quotes. Notice that I have a little space between the O and the closing double quote of hello. I use a plus symbol and then lowercase f first name plus opening quote, space, closing double quote, another plus, and then lowercase l last name, and then a semicolon. All right, and finally, right, so take a moment, make sure you have that exactly. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save my work. You can see there's two little discs next to each other up on the toolbar. I'm going to click those, and you'll notice that the little asterisks inside of each of these tabs went away, and this yellow line here that was along the left-hand side turned to green. And now I'm going to click the little green arrow next to the word Internet Explorer. And there's going to be an explosion of things happening on the screen. Visual Studio changes. You'll see some things in the Windows tray over here on the right-hand side. Internet Explorer will eventually pop open, and we'll navigate to our web page. All right, and so I'm going to go ahead and type in my name. First name is Bob. My last name is Tabor. I'm going to click the Click Me button, and now you can see in the result label the words, Hello, Bob Tabor. Okay? Did you get an error? Make sure you did it exactly the way that I did it. Rewatch this video if you have to. You probably made some small spelling mistake. You may have forgotten a semicolon on the end of each of the 4 lines of code that we wrote. But nonetheless, you need to make sure that you did exactly what I did in this lesson, and you should be in good shape. So now I'm going to explain in the next lesson what we did and why we did it. Okay? We'll see you there. Thank you.